All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football and we're recapping week number 7, the whirlwind of a week. But the man who set the whirlwind record of watching Twister in high school 73 times, only to be outdone by someone who did it for 74 times, my co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing?
Hey, who doesn't love seeing cows fly across the left and the right and come back again? It's a great movie, and I'll always watch that to the very end, maybe marathon every once in a while. But outside of that spectacular news, two things that really hit my mind off this weekend was, number one, my nephew, who's the captain of his golf team, beat me as bad on the golf course as Georgia beat Vanderbilt. Like, I was an inferior opponent, and he beat the living junk out of me. It wasn't even close. And then second of, we are down to 9 undefeated football teams left in the entire nation. And of those 9 teams, the point differentials are pretty significant. Start from the bottom. TCU plus 96, UCLA plus 113, Clemson plus 132, Syracuse plus 137, the Vols plus 148, Ole Miss plus 165, the Ohio State plus 199, Michigan plus 214, and the Georgia Bulldogs plus 228. So 9 undefeateds, and a couple of those, there's already 3 matchups in there of guys playing each other. So that number will definitely decrease as the season moves along. But 9 through 7 weeks is pretty impressive.
So, Fresh, as much as we want to look at these undefeated teams, and there's a lot of great things to talk about. There's a lot of really cool stuff that's going on here. Let's go into our winners and losers. Let's take a look at all of college football. You want to start or you want me to start?
I'll start. I'm going to give a shout out to a program that we've been bashing a lot lately for the past few years, and that's the Colorado Buffaloes. Big clap it up. Finally broke through, got a W in overtime versus Cal Bears. That's a whole different story. Y'all thought we're good. That's just terrible going to Colorado and losing. But big props to Colorado for getting that dub, and they are the last winless team in the nation. So every team in the country has at least one W going after through week 7. So that's pretty impressive. Great job, Colorado, but you have a long way to go to be competitive.
Yeah, I was shocked to see that game happened and Colorado pulled off the W in that one.
That was worth a storm in the field for sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about storm in the field. I'm going early in the week, man. I'm going to the West Virginia Mountaineers. Let's drink some beers. Mountaineers beating the Baylor Bears, showing how difficult it is to go to Morgantown and win there. Halftime, Baylor's up 24-17. And then all of a sudden, West Virginia just absolutely turns on the gas. Unbelievable job out of them. Their running attack puts 217 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns, holds Baylor to just, when you say holds them to 16 points in the second half. And then you look at the stat line for Blake Shapen. Looks like they did knock him out in that game. They did struggle a little bit there when Baylor had to go to their backup for a little bit. But great job out on the Mountaineers, 3-3, 1-2 in that Big 12. That Big 12 is just an absolute minefield right now. Is trying to navigate your way to the Big 12 title game is almost next to impossible. But great job out of the Mountaineers, proving again those country roads take you home, and it's only taking you home to the woodshed if you're coming into Morgantown.
Yeah, I mean, JT Daniels has definitely settled in and got that Mountaineer offense moving.
Yeah. All right, Fresh, who else you got for a winner?
I'm going to give the Utah Utes. I mean,
Good call.
I thought they were in serious trouble. Week 1, they kind of looked lethargic. They played off and got back in gear after that trip to Gainesville. But then going to, the Rose Bowl and getting beat by UCLA last week, they looked out of sorts all over. I know we talked about during the preview. They were a completely different football team on Saturday night. They had the environment there in Rice Eccles, and they had the helmets for the 2, former players who unfortunately passed away on the helmet. And it was a whole thing, and it kind of more of like a rally the program environment. Cam Rising and that offense moved the football. Thomas, and they ran the ball real well. The defense didn't play lights out. It wasn't 2021 version. It wasn't 2020 or 2019, like elite defense from Kyle Whittingham in that unit. But they did just enough to slow down Addison and Caleb Williams and that Lincoln Riley offense from USC. we had seen USC play well. They had a couple games where maybe they didn't look as fantastic like Oregon State, but they finally were matched up against a team that truly had talent and had motivation. I think that's two things where Oregon State I don't think is as talented in Utah, but they had the same motivation. They were able to use the home environment, find ways to win the football game. They're late. It's a big hit to USC's playoff hopes. I mean, they're still obviously not eliminated, but with Oregon playing well, Utah getting that win, and UCLA still being undefeated, USC, that their dreams of a college football playoff spot are in deep dire straits now, and they're going to have to sort of regroup and build that program. And you kind of hope also for USC that doesn't become 2 losses or 3 losses down the road. They can right the ship mentally. So we'll see what done, but major props to Whittingham and the Utah Utes, showing veteran true leadership there and digging deep and putting a big W on the board.
Yeah, I'm going to sit there and crow about the Utah Utes as well. I picked USC in the game, but one of the things that I told everybody is if you want that Utah did have the offensive firepower to go with this. And you take a look at Cameron Rising, counts for 5 touchdowns in this game, almost for 500 total yards of offense. But one of the names that we were looking for, one of the biggest matchups we were looking at, was Dalton Kincaid versus the USC linebackers. Dalton Kincaid, 16 catches, 234 yards. We told you he was Cameron Rising's favorite target and proved it in this game. So great job out of the Utes, man. A bounce back win for them because I was very nervous about what type of season it would be for Utah if the wheels fell off in this game and USC won it. USC looked like they were going to win going away, and it was interesting because they were up 21-7, and I looked over. I said, "This could get ugly fast if Utah doesn't do anything." And the next thing you know, Utah drove down the field and put up some points. So, great job out of the Utes, man.
Yeah, very much so.
All right, Fresh. I can't hold it anymore. Rocky Top, you'll always be. We've been calling this for so long, folks. We've been excited about this Tennessee Volunteers team. Hendon Hooker has his Heisman-like moment. He is number 2 in the country for the Heisman in my eyes. I don't know about anyone else. It's a race between him and C.J. Stroud. And then there's this wide receiver, and his name is Cedric Tillman. He's out. We thought it was looking like he was going to play. But then all of a sudden, Jalen Hyatt, who's been absolutely phenomenal all year long, has a remarkable game. 6 catches, 207 yards, 5 touchdowns. I'm still not sure exactly how Alabama lost this game because they should have won it. They had the football late. They wound up pulling up a touchdown. But where's the Alabama defense? We'll get into that later too, but amazing job out of the Volunteers. It's doing everything we talked about. Fresh, a couple weeks ago, we talked about this stretch for the Volunteers, starting with the Florida Gators coming into Knoxville. Then they had LSU, now Alabama. They have 2 more dates coming up starting at the end of the month. Halloween weekend, they have Kentucky, and setting up for that first weekend in November, the matchup in Athens against the Dogs. It's going to be such a fun way to go for the end of the season for the Volunteers and Josh Heupel's company. But I'm loving this, man. I love that we are so quickly and so high on the Volunteers going into this year. So great job out of them.
It's a special team right now in Tennessee. They have taken advantage of the opportunities and achieve their successes. And it's only going to continue to build. But also the thing now is the pressure now is always continuing to mount. Last year they were 7-6. You had a win, but they had a loss, had a win, have a loss. This time of game, they've been able to mature and win football games consistently, and not just by a point or two, but putting people away. Beating Alabama is no small task. Bryce Young played, and that offense was they got down early. Tennessee looked like they were going to blow the brakes off of them. Nick Saban started his, rant on the sideline. The team sort of responded early, and they were able to fight back and make it a ball game. And then, that's where you kind of wondered, was Tennessee going to collapse? Was this team mentally strong to hold back the Alabama resurgence? Because we've all seen it where, Alabama gets down, and they sort of storm back, and the other team's like, oh my gosh, we had our lead early. And just like last year when Tennessee played Georgia, They had an early lead, and then Georgia's offense got going. The defense started shutting it down. Before you know it, was 42-17. At Tennessee fans were walking out of kneeling middle third quarter. That probably even went through some Tennessee fans, minds of like, well, we had the early lead, and now we're starting to see it slip away very quickly. They were resurgent. They played blow for blow, and that's what championship football teams do. It might not be, a dominant effort, but in the end, it's a win. It's a win. You got lucky on the missed field goal. You played solid defense when you had to, and you had to get a stop. The defense will have to vastly improve. You can't win shootouts every week. I mean, the offense, they played amazing. And you got to give credit to Josh Heupel in the way he's built that program, because it's, it was last year and this year. So it's not been a true, 3 or 4, recruiting cycles. He's gone in there. He's taken one true class and then developed players. Hendon Hooker, this is basically his swan song. I know people are trying to petition for like a 20th year of eligibility, keep him there for another decade. But this is, you got a 1 year, run with it and see what happens going forward. You can't worry about the future. You have to worry about right now with this football team, because there's a lot of talent there. They're doing it without Tillman. There's still other receivers stepping up, running backs stepping up. Offensive line is playing well. Will Anderson was not much of an impact on that defensive end. Dallas Turner wasn't much of an impact on the defensive end, and they actually gave Alabama a touchdown with the miscommunication on the zone read, where he thought Hooker was keeping it, and he didn't really take on the football. Outside of that, they had played well. So Tennessee's definitely an amazing football team right now, and to get got Kentucky coming up in 2 weeks with Will Levis, who's healthy, and then obviously if the Dogs can remain undefeated and beat Florida, they'll have a match of undefeateds in Athens in that first week in November. So that might be for all the cards, and that definitely will be for the SEC East.
Yeah, Fresh, you got any more winners?
I'm going to give it to Michigan. I know I had a lot of questions about Michigan, and coming out of that football game with them and Penn State, who was going to rise up, who was going to be true, and who was going to be a fraud. It wasn't even a close football game, so I think we can call Penn State frauds, because they got absolutely waxed. But Michigan did what fantastic and amazing football teams should do. They put their foot down and they dominated every aspect of the football game. It was not it wasn't like a 23-20 or a 17-14 game where it was sloppy and they were just the team that luckily had more points in the end. They ran the ball down their throats. McCarthy did not have to make the throws, which is part of the Michigan, philosophy. Don't put their quarterback in a bad situation. Let their quarterbacks be the instrument to distribute the offense, but don't force them to have to be on the line to make plays in the end of the ball game. And the defense plays as well as they did, taking out Clifford in that Penn State offense. And you have two great running backs. We even mentioned it, you talked about Ryan and yourself in your conversation, where Blake Corum, being so small, could he really take the hits as the only running back? They had a 2 running back system, which they're calling lightning and lightning, and they ran up and down and around Penn State. And for being Penn State such a proud defensive effort, they call themselves linebacker U. That was a very deflating experience for that program and that defense. So James Franklin's got a lot of work to do, but Jim Harbaugh has that Michigan program. Their eyes and their sets on playing Ohio State. If they steamroll everybody else, they're definitely a top 4 team in the country. But it's going to come down to them in Ohio State Thanksgiving weekend, and the winner goes to Indianapolis most likely, and the loser may or may not be that 4th team into the playoff. You never know.
All right, Fresh, I'm going one more place, and let's go all the way down to Fort Worth and get funky like a monkey already again. TCU Horned Frogs basically just being steamrolled in the first half and picking themselves off the mat and going blow for blow, even into the fourth quarter, scoring 14 points in the fourth quarter to push the game into overtime. Max Duggan, great game out of him. He had a phenomenal game with 286 and 2 scores. Quentin Johnson, though, with those 8 catches and 180 yards and a touchdown, TCU really showed their mettle there. And I wanted to think for a little bit, and I was thinking about putting Oklahoma State as one of my losers. But then I took a look at what they were able to do against TCU. And, to me, this looks like a game that just didn't bounce your way. Spencer Sanders had a phenomenal game himself, having 3 touchdowns over there. But at the end of the day, Horned Frogs, man, 6-0. Who saw this one coming out of TCU? I don't think anyone had TCU picked any higher than 5th or 6th in the Big 12. So,
yeah, I mean, definitely Sonny Dykes right now, I think National Coach of the Year, up with him and Josh Heupel running for National Coach of the Year. But
absolutely,
you kind of look at it where I kind of put Oklahoma State as a mini loser, because this is the kind of game that you have to win. If you really want to be the stalwart program, you have to find a way to win that football game. And just losing down the stretch, it looked just like the Baylor loss in the SEC in the Big 12 title game last year, where you're like, we have the moment and we just can't capture it. But will be interesting to see what TCU does. But they still have Texas and K-State left on the schedule. Really, as their big two opponents. But we'll see how they finish out and if they can make it all the way undefeated.
Absolutely. All right, Fresh, let's go to the other side here. Let's talk about losers from this past weekend. Who you got?
First off, Notre Dame.
Oof.
I mean, you go to Vegas, you eviscerate BYU in every aspect of the game, and then you come home and you lose to Stanford. The Stanford Cardinal. How? It's horrible. I mean, that's all I got to say. Like, it was 17-14. The offense was what you had versus BYU the week before, non-existent this week. I can't explain how you completely just laid another egg. I mean, you've lost to Marshall and Stanford at home. We thought, Marcus Freeman was the answer there, and obviously it's still early, but the L's are starting to mount where maybe he doesn't have that program. And this is kind of where you get the situations where the players are more excited for the coach to be hired. And maybe they think they don't have to work as hard. And they're obviously not working as hard. They're not playing as hard. Or maybe Brian Kelly knew that the talent pool was greatly deflated when he decided to get out of town. But something isn't right there in South Bend. And Freeman probably doesn't have that much of a leash if these losses keep coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Fresh, I'm going to go all the way down into a non-Power 5. James Madison, man. Losing to Georgia Southern. James Madison, you made the top 25. You were undefeated going into this week and had an opportunity to kind of continue to roll over Georgia Southern. Now, Georgia Southern, not a bad football program. They're pretty solid. But they had James Madison, you had the win against Appalachian State. You're setting up a nice game coming up against Marshall and Louisville, but they just couldn't get the job done. I look at what they did offensively, and they were all right. They had 675 yards of total offense and still only put up 38 points. I know that's weird to say only 38 points, but if you put up almost 700 yards of total offense, I expect you to be hanging like a 50 or 60 burger on somebody, and you only put up 38 points. And then all of a sudden, you let Georgia Southern put up 45 and almost have 600 yards themselves. They almost had 600 yards passing. Bad job out of you, James Madison. Defense.
You don't just walk into Statesboro, Georgia on the banks of the Eagle River and expect to get a W. Clay Helton, you taken a very terrible football team last year. You've gotten some key victories, beating a ranked team in James Madison at home. You go to Nebraska. Interesting to see what he's doing down there as well. Give him a little credit. But JMU, making that chip top 25 is a lot tougher, and people take you a little more seriously.
Yeah. It'd be interesting when we kind of sometimes dive in those non-Power 5 schools, man, and look at some of the good things that they're doing. We call James Madison a loser for this weekend, but 5-1 on the year so far and looking like they're going to be bowl eligible there. Same with Georgia Southern, too. Don't take either one of those teams lightly into the bowl season.
Well, staying down the Fun Belt, how about Coastal Carolina? The Chanticleers, Grayson McCall had a great season. We're definitely a preseason pick to play for the title and maybe even, be a 10-1, a 10-2, or 9-3 football team, and still it's possible. But you lose to Old Dominion. You don't just get beat; you get smoked by Old Dominion. Now, yeah, ODU beat Virginia Tech, but they didn't do it in the most fabulous fashion. But they were not ready to play, and ODU got them. And tip of the cap to the Monarchs, but the Chanticleers definitely have some chinks in the armor, and it's a big hit to the program's mystique. And McCall in his senior year was looking to do big things.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of shocking that we saw that out of them too. I was a little like, come on, when I saw that final score on that one. All right, Fresh. My next loser is the Minnesota Golden Gophers, man. Dude, I couldn't even imagine this game. I was looking, going, Minnesota is going into there. PJ Fleck, Mohim Abraham was going to just be absolutely phenomenal. And he had a good game. Abraham had a good game with 127 yards and a touchdown. But Illinois and what Brett Bielema has going on there was absolutely remarkable. Minnesota, you're supposed to be better than this. Tanner Morgan, 4 of 12 for 21 yards. They had 38 yards passing. They only ran a grand total, and I can't believe this, of 42 offensive plays. What team does that? What team runs only 42 offensive plays in a game? I don't know. Golden Gophers, I expected more out of you. This was an absolutely terrible job. I'm very disappointed in the Gophers, man.
I mean, I think we both picked the Gophers to obviously win the Big Ten West and make it to Indianapolis. I mean, technically on paper, there's still a shot, but the way Illinois is playing right now, it's going to be very difficult. And you could think, outside of some wacky things in the second half versus Indiana, Illinois could be undefeated right now. And they've looked at Minnesota and Wisconsin, and they dominated both of them. So Illinois and Brett Bielema in year 2 are in a great shape. It's excited to see where they come in. PJ Fleck, again, you had a chance to really grasp it, and you let it go. Just like a couple years ago when you had a chance to, at home versus Wisconsin, all you do is win, and you go to the Big Ten title game, and you got beat. Like, I think even the program, the fans, like, they want that next level. It's always exciting to get up to that one point, and right when you're there, the crescendo, it just drops. So it's tough, and to see that program sort of just not get over that next level.
All right, Fresh, my next loser is the BYU Cougars over there in Provo, Utah. You had a marquee matchup with Arkansas coming into town. Like, this was the interesting thing to me, is that you got Arkansas to come to Utah, not BYU having to go over to Arkansas. And then you just completely laid an egg. You couldn't really run the ball very well against Arkansas. And Arkansas was getting KJ Jefferson back. I know you just watched Jefferson just completely torch your team. He completely torched your team. He almost accounted for 400 yards of total offense himself, 5 passing touchdowns of this game, and they're not really a great passing team. Like, if you would have told me that KJ Jefferson had 5 touchdowns on the ground, I would have believed you. I was saying, oh, that's right. That's what Arkansas and the Razorback do. But BYU, you came into this year, we had very high expectations for you. I'll give the Cougars one piece of credit, man. They scheduled how a non-Power 5 team should schedule. Like, they challenged themselves in their schedule. They won some big games, but the problem was when you get really high on a team, all of a sudden the bottom just drops out, and some of these teams go in and just absolutely destroy you. This wasn't even very as close as the score looks at the end of it, but I expected more out of BYU. I expected this game to be a little more competitive.
Yeah, and it's tough for BYU. You're making that transition to the Big 12, and you've played Notre Dame, which is a perennial solid team, not this year, obviously, and Arkansas, an SEC program, back-to-back weeks, and you've got thoroughly dominated both times. A lot of seniors probably leaving the program. Does not exactly the best transition moving up to the Big 12 next year. You kind of look at comparison, Cincinnati and UCF playing great football right now and really looking like they're making that positive movement and ready to make the next level, the next jump. BYU had an easy start, and they're starting to clunk back down and hit reality real quick.
Yeah. Fresh, you got any more losers?
Another team on the yo-yo is Mississippi State Bulldogs. 1 week you look great. You absolutely just annihilate some teams, and you dominate. And then you get Kentucky with Will Levis coming off an injury, and you just get manhandled by the Kentucky Wildcats. It shows that, number one, Kentucky still has life, but also it just shows Mississippi State, like, when are we going to get consistent play from you? 1 week you look absolutely amazing. You're throwing the ball. Will Rogers is throwing darts all over the place. You went down to Baton Rouge and you lost to LSU. You get this game, you lose to Kentucky, but then A&M, who played Bama right to the very end, you torch them. I don't think any of us really know what to get from the play calling from Mike Leach and the offense and the defense. Like, what week are we going to get a consistent game from week to week from Mississippi State? They still have they got Alabama this week in Tuscaloosa, and that's probably going to be a very angry Alabama football team. They still have Ole Miss left on the schedule, and they still got Georgia. Those 3 games, all 3 right now in the top 10. Are they going to show up for one of those games? Are they going to show up for none? Are they going to show up for all three? Like, we don't even know. I don't even think the people in the locker room know right now. And it's a kind of a program thing where you want consistency. You want to continue to see progress moving forward. And right when you start thinking this team's going to get there, they just lay an egg or they drop the ball. As a fan, I'm sure you're probably feeling the same thing. But it's just something that none of us can really get an understanding of what kind of football team they have there at Mississippi State week to week in to week out. No one really knows.
All right, Fresh, my last loser for the week was the Penn State Nittany Lions, man. I know you had Michigan as one of the winners. Penn State, you have a marquee win when you go down into SEC territory and completely beat the trash out of Auburn. I mean, you completely eviscerate the Tigers down there. And then you start to string these wins together. And then you go into Michigan, you go into the Big House, into a marquee matchup. You are the Fox kickoff at noon. All eyeballs are on you, and you just get completely boat raced by Michigan. Sooner or later, it's gut check time. Like James Franklin, Manny Diaz, all of this stuff being made about how great of coaches you are. You let Michigan run for 418 yards on the ground. How didn't you know Michigan was going to run the ball? Like, did you just get completely just dominated by the Michigan offensive line and they just ran the ball because they felt like it against you? Penn State, like, we knew that they were coming in to do this. Like, Fresh and I could have game planned for this game and said, listen, we're going to sell out to stop the run and make J.J. McCarthy beat us through the pass. And you know what? What the heck? Let's put 8, 9, maybe even 10 guys in the box and just go after, make sure that the running game doesn't beat us. But James Franklin doing James Franklin type things and losing these big games. I would love to see, and I'm probably going to look this up for a game or two coming up, is what's James Franklin's record in some of these big marquee matchups? Because he's a good coach. He wins the games he's supposed to win, but I want to know what he does against when the lights are the brightest and the stage is the biggest.
Oh, totally agree. It's, when the lights are brightest and making progress and improving. There's no improvement at Penn State right now. They are a stagnant program, and James Franklin's lucky that there's a lot of jobs last year and his agent got him paid because that program is they're okay, and they're going to get highly ranked, and they're going to be a preseason top 25 team, and then they're going to run clunkers midway through October.
No one's buying out that contract either.
No, and talking about teams that have unimpressed since early in the season, Florida and Florida State after week 1, they both have been just abysmal. Their L's have been flying around lately in October, and there's a big separation there. But this past weekend was just the cherry on the top when both losing to Tiger teams, and both at home too. Pretty bad for both those state programs. Oh, and speaking of amazing college football, if you haven't heard, we just released our exclusive interview with a writer for the EA Sports new NCAA football game, Chris Davis. While you're checking out all of our stuff, check out our YouTube page. Check out the episode. It's absolutely fantastic. Great episode. He brings a lot of insight on what the game's bringing to everybody out, when it's going to come out, and all the new features that are happening. So really, if you're not just in for the live games, you want to do it for video game style, tune into that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fun interview to do too. We've done a couple interviews here in the past, and we're trying to line up a couple more as well. But a fun interview, especially if you're a fan of NCAA football, just getting a chance to go back and listen to what it's like working for EA Sports. I thought that was the most fascinating thing, like what it's like and how you get to that job, and then seeing like the things from behind the scenes, things that, you know, the people who are writing these games are humans, and they're just normal people, and they have the things that they like, and their own personality starts to come out into these games. So great interview with Chris, and I absolutely loved that one.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the best episodes we've had as we get closer to our 100th episode.
Yeah, that's coming very, very soon. All right, folks, you've been listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. Remember, we're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you're going to spinnablesports.com. Yes, that is spinnablesports.com. Make sure you like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Stitcher. I don't know. There's a bunch of them out there. I don't even know if Stitcher has podcasts, but Amazon Pods, Google Pods, something. You know I don't know them all. Like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, and make sure you are watching us on the YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, like us, hit that notification bell. Make sure you notify each and every week of the episodes that we're putting out there for you, because week number 8 is going to be an interesting one. We're going away from the Power 5 conferences, and then we're moving to week number 9, the scariest weekend of the year, Halloween weekend. We want to also make sure that we give a special shout out to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible. He's had an interesting week, so hope he's feeling better. But without him, this podcast would not be in existence. So special thanks to him and everyone who's following us along on Twitter. Friday night, jumped into a Twitter space, had a great time with the people there. Looking like we're going to be hosting one coming in the near future, so make sure you look out for that out there. Fresh, it's a great time of the year, man.
It's a great time of the year. All sports are going, but the most important, we're down the stretch here in college football season. The games even mean so much more now.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll have another episode for you later this week, and good night.
Bye, y'all.